So welcome to the breakout session, The Value of Municipal Shared Services. My name is Jeff Ziplo. I am a principal um, at a firm by the name of Clifton Larson Allen, and I'll get a little bit more into that in a little bit. I do want to thank the Rhode Island League of Towns and Cities for the opportunity to present today and provide some insight as to, my vision, if you will, of municipal shared services, and certainly how shared services can help create a better opportunity for municipalities and create actually a different dialogue, if you will, between different departments, municipalities, with school districts and the like. What I do want to do is share with you the agenda for today. So let's take a look at that. I just want to give you a quick overview of who CLA is and, in fact, who Jeff Ziplo is. We'll discuss the shared services concepts, learn why it's becoming at least increasingly popular discussion, and I'll give you my thoughts on that. How do we do it the right way? And then certainly how to get started. What I wanted to do is just give you a bit of an overview of CLA and just to put everyone at ease. If you have heard me before, again, Jeff Ziplo, I would have said originally that I'm with Bloom Shapiro. Bloom Shapiro was a firm in the Northeast and had about 550 people or so. As of January 1st of this year, we merged actually with CLA, Clifton Larson Allen, and our practice actually complement each other very well. And what it does for us actually is it provides a deeper and stronger depth and breadth of capabilities and services. I mentioned Bloom Shapiro as a whole had about 75 people in our government practice, and now at CLA, which is a much larger firm, we have a presence, and in fact, we have about 400 professionals dedicated to state and local government. And I'm not going to bore you with any more of the details, but we merged because Bloom Shapiro had a fairly significant presence in the Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts areas, and CLA was looking to expand their market, and they came to us, and it seemed like a great fit. Their culture, their people was a tremendous fit, and they had a very significant practice area with state and local government, and as a result, we merged. So that's the good news. What we're doing together in state and local government is working with state agencies, municipalities, school districts, and a number of different areas. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but again, I think it's a great opportunity for us as well as for our clients, because we can bring to bear a number of additional services that hopefully some of you might be interested in. So I'm going to move off of that topic and get into something that is far more important, I think, to all of us, which is, shared services. And what I'd like to do first is to provide a little bit more clarity and give you a sense of my definition to shared services. And I guess we can look at it in a number of different ways, but it's really consolidating or joining together, various business operations, either town to town or municipality to municipality, school district to town, or school district to school district. And so we also see shared services as a way to regionalize. And certainly when you think about the school district to school district, we could have, and in many instances, have regionalized school districts. But when we talk about the municipalities, we can have centralized public safety as an example and use the centralized public safety environment in a way to share services. And I think a good example or some examples of this, when you look at the town to town, health districts are certainly an area where we have seen, shared services, regionalization, if you will, of health districts across, municipalities. I mentioned public safety before. Public works to a limited extent, although I think the opportunity is there. The same thing is true with facilities. Certainly, we've seen animal control as some shared services between municipalities, as well as recreation and tax collector and assessor services. School to school, I mentioned before, a lot of regional school systems, sharing resources. And then we get to the concept of the town to school or municipality to the school. And we've seen a number of areas, and actually are working on a number of areas with some municipalities and schools right now, to share and blend together facilities operations, which would include custodial, as well as typically public works, the financial operations between the school back office and the municipalities, financial operations. HR is always a good discussion. IT technology and sharing and having a common IT department between the municipality and the school, I think are really some areas of opportunities that we should consider and look at, as well as payroll. And so one of the things to consider as we look at sharing services is, what are we doing with that concept? Are we just sharing services? Are we jointly purchasing goods? Are we sharing equipment? Are we going to share software? Are we going to actually consolidate municipal service? And I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is there's not one size that fits all. I think that we just need to be very cognizant of what we're trying to accomplish, and equally important, how we're going to accomplish it, because certainly we've seen a lot of change over the past couple years, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. And I think, this whole concept of shared services or joint purchasing of goods or sharing of equipment or software is something that is going to be very strategic for many municipalities and school districts in the Northeast, because we need to start thinking a bit differently. So what I'd like to do is, why should we really consider it? It's clear to me that, and hopefully to many of you, that the municipalities' budgets are shrinking, and we've seen it over the past number of years, no doubt. I do believe that COVID has had and will continue to have an impact on municipal budgets, and a little bit more on that in a minute. We all know that municipalities are constantly under pressure by our residents, by our boards, to keep spending down and minimize spending. But I guess the flip side of that is we want and our residents are demanding ongoing improvements to service. And so, there's this, double-edged sword here that, we need to reduce spend or the spend, but we need to improve services, and shared services might be a way to accomplish that. We're also seeing an aging workforce within municipalities, and I certainly see that in many municipalities that I work with. And I can't just say it's on the municipality side. I also think it's on the school district side. And we need to be cognizant of that. The resources and the people that are out there providing services in the past are aging. And I think we need to consider that what an aging population, an aging workforce will do to the resources that are available both at the municipal and school district side. Um, Certainly, we've seen our operational practices aging, although I would submit to you that because of COVID and because of our need to work remotely, um, I suspect there has been a bit of a shift in operational practices within municipalities. And certainly we're seeing more and more of it. We need to be able to figure out a better game plan to be able to work remotely or do things in a more efficient way so we don't have to print out checks, so that we can move along purchase orders without having to be in the office. And certainly there's always discussions and concerns about, control and accountability. And these are all items that, we should be considering as we, look at shared services. So COVID, I mentioned COVID earlier. I do believe that COVID is having a rippling effect on towns and cities, actually across the country. And in fact, there was a survey done, and some of these statistics that you see here is a survey done across the country of what that impact has been. We're seeing 61% of the cities, municipalities are delaying or canceling equipment purchases and purchases in general. There's concerns about, the tax revenue and tax dollars that are coming in from our residents. Are they going to be able to pay their taxes? And so there's a lot of thought around, well, we need to, at the very least, we cannot increase the spend within our municipality. We need to maintain it or reduce it, but we also need to be cognizant of the fact that the revenue dollars, the tax dollars that we thought were going to be coming into the community may not be there, and what impact does that have on the municipality as a whole. There's a comment here about 13% cuts to code inspection and planning. I think there is some of that, but to me, the flip side is I think that in talking with many municipalities that I work with on the building side and the building inspector side, there's been a bit of an increase because people are trying to, do things on their own homes. They're trying to, build out offices and things like that that may have an impact on the building department. So maybe there's a push there. But I do believe that COVID has forced us, maybe allowed us, but I guess some would argue forced us to consider a new normal. We need to think differently. I would tell you before COVID that we need to create a new normal. COVID, I think, is pushing the frontier on that. And instead of thinking about it, I think we need to actually implement a new normal, looking at remote working, looking at process changes and how we actually work both in the office and outside of the office. And I think COVID and the COVID-like situations are going to be around for a while, unfortunately. So we need to think differently. And one of my bullet points here, although I would have probably said or told you a little bit different before the COVID implication, is, does everyone really need to be in one location? So when we think about shared services, and you'll see it in a follow-up bullet point later on, but when you think about location, there were a lot of people that said when we put together or implement shared services, they have to be under one umbrella. They have to be sitting together. Typically, those kind of discussions would happen in financial operations or IT and technology. I'm not so sure anymore. I think what COVID has done is it has allowed many of us to rethink that whole location discussion. And do we really need to be together in one location? Are there tools in place to allow us to collaborate and do things in an efficient way and still get to the same result? The tools of Teams or Zoom to have conference calls is certainly one way, and there's a number of ways we can use collaboration tools so to effectively allow us to work as a team, but not necessarily in the same location. So again, I think COVID has allowed us to think differently. So, why do we want to consider shared services? Certainly, it's something that can increase, efficiencies. We can be doing things in a very similar way between town, school, or town, school. It's a way to, work together and create a more cooperative and team environment. Um, it is a way to reduce or avoid costs, and you'll see that I have an asterisk there. And the reason for that asterisk is I want to be very clear about shared services. What it can't be is an all-out full court press on reducing FTE counts. And I want to be very clear about that. You'll notice, reduction in FTEs is not on this list, and it is done so intentionally. I have seen a number of attempts at shared service where the goal simply was to cut FTEs. And one of the things I learned early on is if that is the ultimate goal of shared services, it will not be successful. It will turn into a very, very bad situation very quickly. Can we reduce or avoid costs? I think the answer is absolutely yes. Shared services is certainly a way to create and avoid costs as it relates to, and it gives us the opportunity to have an automatic backup. We know that most municipalities, are working lean and mean, and they really don't have a lot of backup. A second person to run and process payroll or do other types of things. And what shared services can do is it can provide immediate backup of personnel really at no additional cost. And so therein lies that cost avoidance and something that really should be looked at in a more detailed way. I will say that it really is very important that if we are considering shared services, we do need to maintain the current level of service, and hopefully in some ways we can enhance that level of service and improve service delivery overall. And then we may see some cost reduction if we have employees over time and with better efficiencies that we don't need to that there's some employee turnover and that we might not need to refill positions. And or we have open positions right now that we have budgeted for, and by moving forward with shared services, we can reduce or avoid some of those costs. So, where has this been done? A couple of things. Certainly, Massachusetts it has been doing it. I did a little bit of research, if you will, and Mass is looking at shared services. They have the shared services manual, and this was done, I believe, in 2009. Is it fully implemented across all of Mass? I would tell you the answer is no, but there are areas within Massachusetts that shared services has been implemented. The same thing is true, I would say, within Rhode Island to some extent. The same thing is true within Connecticut. There's a number of municipalities that I've actually worked with in Connecticut specifically that they operate as one unit between the municipality and the school district in a number of areas: operations, payroll, IT, and facilities. And what it has done is it has changed the types of discussions. It's not us versus them. There's always the we. How are we going to resolve this problem? And I really do believe that, and for one of the reasons I thought this session was very important is shared services gets people thinking differently, and it gives them a different perspective of we have a lion's share of the revenues are coming from our residents, and we want to do and find the best ways to spend their money and do it in a very directed way so that it is very impactful for the municipality and the public schools. And I believe that shared services allows for that in a very different and better way, frankly. I did want to share with you some discussion on Rhode Island. I hope many of you know that back in May of 2010, there was a state commission on shared municipal services. You can look at some of the bullet points here. Establish uniform, chart of accounts, that's COA, for data among municipalities and schools. To my knowledge and understanding, that did take place with on the school side, to a lesser extent, I believe, on the municipal side. But at the end of the day, we did have, and there was a commission in 2010 to put forth, a shared municipal services strategy within Rhode Island. And you can see some of the other bullet points: consolidate dispatch services between cities and towns, which would be that town-to-town discussion I mentioned earlier, merge tax collections between cities and towns. So there was a lot of discussion back in 2010. I think that has come back around recently, particularly as a result of COVID. And so there's this Municipal Resilience Task Force 2020. And when you read through all of it, certainly there's an underlying theme that talks about shared services and trying to figure out better ways to use the valuable resources that exist within our municipalities and school systems. So one of the things that we need to be looking at and considering is success factors. Certainly, leadership is really important. Trying to implement shared services, we do need to have some good leadership, some good direction. It's really the tone at the top. We need people that have that can-do attitude, and that we have talented people in place. And one of the things I've learned over time is that in many of our municipalities, we have very talented people, and they can be part of this program that we need to build and demonstrate success on. And so I think that's certainly a piece of the equation. Collaboration. We do need to collaborate. We need to put into place some good collaboration opportunities. We need to have some governance associated with that. An element of shared service many times is working with unions and understanding, what their concerns are with shared services, understanding how we can work with them to make shared service opportunities a reality. And I guess my point here is you can't ignore the unions. Unions are part of the equation, and we need to integrate them into the discussion. We need to make sure that we understand what their concerns and issues are and address them as best as possible. We need commitment, and commitment comes at many different levels, not only at the leadership level, but we really do need to have commitment with all the people within the various groups that we're trying to bring together. And that needs to be discussed up front and worked on over time. It just doesn't happen overnight, but that commitment is a forward-thinking discussion and something that we need to be cognizant of, eyes open when we walk into any type of shared services opportunity. And then last but not least, we do need to have a unified vision. Where is this shared services group going? What are their success? How do we measure success? And make sure that we're all heading in the same direction. And I think once we do and have a lot of these success factors in place, we can certainly initiate discussions regarding shared services. So the next slide, I think, helps to, talk a little bit more about, the success, right? So focusing first on the opportunities, where do we see the opportunities? And you'll see in the same sentence, let's not worry about the barriers initially, right? We can't ignore them long term, but what we can do, and I think what's really of value and important, is let's talk about the opportunities. What are those shared service opportunities that we see within our respective communities that we feel that will be impactful to the municipality, be impactful to the school district, and or to others. And I think once we can identify them, and I've provided some insight as to where I think some of those opportunities are, then we can start looking at, and overcoming barriers. But if we always throw up the barriers first, we're never going to get to, attempt to get to first base. So I think identifying first those opportunities is extremely important. I mentioned a little bit about this, but ensuring mutual goals and gains. When we're bringing together two groups of people to consolidate these groups, we do need to ensure that, one, we're heading in, down a common path, and that we have mutual gains. And again, mutual gains cannot be that we're trying to reduce, overhead by X number of FTEs. And I guess one of the stories, and I'll share it with you now, is that I was working on a shared services project between a municipality and school district, and they wanted to bring together the financial operations. And at the time, things were moving forward with the project, and then the first selectman actually called me into his office and said, I've got the plan. I know what we're going to do. And I said, okay, what is the plan? What is your plan? And he says, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to cut 3 people. We're going to cut 3 FTEs, and then we're going to bring them together, and, we'll be great. And to be quite frank, it was, I could see the handwriting on the wall, and realize that really the goal of this project, of this first selectman's project, was really headcount and reducing FTEs. And as I mentioned earlier, that can't be the reason we do this. And if it is, then we need to think differently. And in fact, in this particular instance, I thought it was best to walk away. And I shared my thoughts and comments and did walk away from the project, because I knew the direction that he wanted and the direction he was going to take was going to end up in a very bad situation, and one that would not be successful and have long-term sustainability, which I think is the most important thing. We need to ensure a positive outcome for all, and that means there's no winners and losers. There's only winners, and we need to figure out what those wins are and share those wins with everyone up front, so there are no surprises. And I guess lastly is uniting the mission, right? Better service delivery overall, better response time for IT support, better whatever it is. We just need to unite that mission and make sure that we're all on the same page. And part of that is figuring out, the right way to look at shared services and have a successful start. A clearly understood mission and vision. We will need to identify, you know, and make sure there are clear reporting lines. One of the things that I have seen in the past is, failed shared service um, opportunities have resulted when, an organization says, we're going to bring together our public works, facilities, custodial services, and we're just going to mash them together and make them one unit. And to be quite frank, it just doesn't happen that way. We need to understand what the reporting lines are. We need to understand how we are, in fact, going to work together. And I'll get into some of the details. We need to understand roles and responsibilities. Just mashing together two groups of people will result in an unsuccessful shared services opportunity. And I pretty much can guarantee that. Part of doing it the right way is documenting policies and procedures for that joint operation. And the last bullet here is a memorandum of understanding, and I'll provide a little bit more guidance on that in a minute. Things that we need to watch out for: informality, right? We just, as I mentioned earlier, throwing together groups of people will not be successful. So, we need to have formality. We need to, think before we react, and come up with a very prescriptive game plan as to how these groups are going to be working together, what the organizational structure is, and make sure everyone understands what the wins are. It cannot just be a handshake. We need to get into the details. And as they always say, the devil's in the details. Well, when we talk about shared services, in fact, the devil is in the details, and we need to make sure we understand what those details are. And we also need to understand all the workers, all of our employees need to understand what those details are. And we need to create that opportunity that will last, and document, all of this, so that we know where we started and we know where we want to be, and we documented, everything in between. And part of that, creating an opportunity that will last, is really part of the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. How are we going to work together? What are the goals, if you will? What are the rules of engagement? How are we going to make this happen, and help to solidify that arrangement between the two organizations? And that memorandum of understanding will help create this opportunity, and it will last over time. I've seen many instances where we get new board members on various boards, either on the municipality side or on the school district side. And in fact, they want to rip out and replace, some of the shared service opportunities. And we need to put in place a better program and practice to allow for this to endure, different boards and board members over time. And so that memorandum of understanding or any other type of agreement is really important. We do have challenges, and certainly, we need to be aware of them up front. What does the organizational structure look like? Who's going to oversee this new group of people? The impact of the various bargaining units and unions. We again, we need to work with them. We need to understand them, and they in turn hopefully will understand us. And we need to be able to manage the merger of, the various departments. Certainly maintain the quality of service. We need to be able to figure out and monitor ways to measure our success, and be able to kind of adapt and regroup if we're not meeting either the quality of service or the metrics that we've identified up front. And then we got to figure out a way to figure out how we're going to deal with issues and problems that come up. And one of the things, I do know about shared services is that it's never picture perfect. There are always opportunities to improve of what we've done and ways to work together. But we need to figure out how we're going to address any type of issues and problems and figure out, the appropriate discussions and figure out the right people to have those discussions with. Standard operating procedures and practices is extremely important to develop right out of the gate. What are the departmental standards? What are the metrics? What are the priorities? How are we going to work together as a team? And I do view shared services as an opportunity to create teams of people. And I also believe very strongly that when we create teams, we can create a more effective and efficient operating environment. And I've just seen it time and time again that teams are the way to go, working together and creating these standard operating practices and procedures, and having people input their own ideas into, what can we do differently that will make us better. And that's part of this overall program. And then we need to think about cost savings. And I look at there's tangible and intangible cost savings. Excuse me. Some of them we can, put our fingers on immediately. Tangible savings are, we have a position and an open position that based on this bringing together of people within these multiple departments, we might not need that position anymore. So we actually can, there's a cost savings right there. There may be some intangibles. I mentioned earlier the avoidance cost of getting an immediate backup of people. So we don't need to hire anyone, and that may be construed as, along the intangibles. I do want to point out though, and I do recognize shared services may not be the answer. And I guess my point here is there needs to be an evaluation process, and part of that evaluation process is a confirmation of, does it make sense or does it not make sense? And I'm going to show you a couple of slides that help to guide people as to whether or not this is going to be a good fit or not. My next slide, I think, should have been up in the previous part of my presentation, which is the Memorandum of Understanding, which is more of a list of things that we may want to bring out as part of a formalized document, setting ourselves up for the long term. What does that look like? What does the relationship between the parties look like? Establishing, how we're, the reporting lines, job duties and descriptions. Those could all be incorporated as part of a memorandum of understanding. Even things about, how if we have a shared budget officer that we're, or a person who's responsible for budgeting, or the chief financial officer, director of finance, or business office manager, depending on whatever titles we use. But how would we terminate people, and how do we hire people? And I'm thinking right now between a municipality and school district, and we have a superintendent who needs to be part of the discussion. We have a mayor or town manager, whatever form of government you have, who is doing the hiring and firing. And again, this needs to be a win-win. And if we're sharing people, we need to share in the ownership, responsibility, and accountability of these positions. And I think we also need to document, maybe within the Memorandum of Understanding, that we need to do it in it needs to be a team effort, meaning the mayor and or the superintendent, or I shouldn't say and or, the mayor and superintendent work together to do any type of significant hiring or terminations within their respective groups. So the next question is, how do we get started? And what I wanted to provide you with, this is, the Bloom-Shapiro methodology. This is how we typically look at shared services and perform, I'll call it that needs assessment or the readiness assessment of shared services. So I'm going to just walk you through our approach, and we can certainly, uh, I'll expound upon or expand on, some of my thoughts here. If anyone has any questions throughout, please feel free to go to the question and answer tab and put in any type of questions that you might have. I'd be more than happy to answer them as I'm going through, if not through the presentation, certainly at the tail end. I'll do my best to answer questions, time permitting. So I want to show you just this general diagram. And these are the aspects and components of the needs assessment: roles and responsibilities, tools and technology. And we're going to dive into more of these aspects in a little bit: operating activities, location of operations. And I think this is one, excuse me, this is one that we can certainly have a broader discussion about. I guess when I get to that topic, we certainly will have a broader discussion. Delivery services, and then I'll call it the analytics, which is we do need to take a look at payroll and benefits and perform an analysis of the people that we're bringing in, and it's really salary, I think, that I'm referring to here, and benefits, to see if there are any anomalies between the groups of people that we're trying to bring together. So let me share with you, and let's go through this chart one quickly. So talking about roles and responsibilities, and part of this is we do need to understand the duties and tasks for the staff within the selected departments. We need to assess what the roles and responsibilities are. What we're going to end up doing as part of this is looking for tasks and or overlap of duties and responsibilities. We need to understand the organizational structure and what the staffing levels are. And what I mean by that is, do we have any open positions, within the various departments? Do we need more people? And then also, validate what their skill sets are. And, if we have or do find gaps, confirm any type of additional training needs. And this is, how we get to this is literally sitting down with every single person within the various departments to understand what they do, how they do it, what their challenges are. We need to understand what their DNA is, not individually, but collectively, what the department's DNA, their personality is, and figure out, how we can blend together these groups of people. And you need to really understand the people that we're trying to bring together. So, this is not something that you just, you talk to one person. You need to talk to many people to really get a full and complete understanding of the people within the departments, so that you can put forth some good recommendations of how this might be brought together. The second area is tools and technology, and this one is an important one. I've been asked many times, we've got a financial operations on the town side, a business office operations that does similar things on the school side, and we're going to bring, people together. And one of the first questions I will ask is, okay, we may be able to do that, but what are the tools that we're going to use? And I would submit, to this group that we can't have two different financial systems and operate effectively and efficiently. There has to be one. So for any organizations that are using the same technology tools for departments, you're one step up. You're in a great position to move forward. If you're not there, we need to really think about and consider how we can get there, because trying to bring together a team of people and have a team of people using two different sets of tools is really not a team. And again, I think this is one of the warning signs and warning flags that you need to be aware of, that if we're going to bring them together, we need to be using the same tools, um, maybe not necessarily in the same way. And what I mean by that is, when you think of the HR hiring process, we will use the same tool for hiring, but we're going to have different sign-off processes and procedures, meaning the superintendent is not going to be signing off on police. Likewise, the town manager, first selectman, isn't going to be signing off on teachers. So we're using the same tool, but we're going to create, similar paths of use, not identical. And that's really what I mean by, these technologies. We really need to understand how they're used, who has access, and the last bullet point here, confirming system strengths and weaknesses, because if we have to pick a tool or a system for both groups, we need to understand which one is going to be the best fit for for both groups. Another key goal is operating activities. We need to perform walkthroughs. What does um, the daily operations look like? What are those walkthroughs? What are the procedures and processes that we need to manage? Reviewing policies and procedures. Do we do things in a similar way from a policies and procedures perspective? And how can we adopt or bring together multiple standards into one? And that's not to say that we can't have multiple operating procedures for two different groups, town versus school district, but we need to understand what those differences are. I guess in some ways we need to challenge, do those differences make sense? If they do, that's great, but we should definitely understand them. And one of the ways to understand them, and we do this all the time, is developing process workflow diagrams. So we can literally diagram out, what the workflow and process and procedures are, so that if there are bottlenecks or inefficiencies, typically we can see them and then potentially work together. Again, I'm going to use the word, as a team, to bring together these multiple groups and figure out the best course of action that is going to make us successful. So, I think, that is an important goal of operating activities. Here's the one that I am now struggling with, and I put it in here because I did want to share with you that it was part of our standard discussion, that if we're going to bring two groups of folks together, we need to be many times in this similar space, meaning if we're going to create a team, we need to create a place where the team can get together. And, in the past, I would say, we need to do a bit of a more formal space analysis and look at, any type of physical processes and what our ability is to get additional space so that we can bring everyone together. So now let's bring reality and what we have learned from COVID. I am now challenging this factor. Do we need to really be operating in one location? And I guess I've come to the conclusion that we don't. But along with that conclusion, we don't. I think we need to ensure that we are able to use tools to collaborate, tools where we can get together as a team and visually see one another, like Zoom, like Teams. Google has a product out there. I'm not pushing or promoting any type of product, but I think that we can do things if set up appropriately in a remote way so that we can mitigate the item here of location operations. And so I think we're going to find and see a lot about this in the future because I do believe that we have learned that although location, it's great to be working with one another. It's great to see people. It's great to be sitting next to people. I think COVID has certainly changed that for the very near future, if not, the rest of my lifetime. And excuse me, and hopefully we'll be able to come up to some resolutions there. Service delivery, well, we can't lose sight of this. Bringing together multiple groups of people, we need to understand what the service delivery requirements are. And we also need to figure out and make sure that whatever we do, we can maintain the level of service and or enhance it. And this task helps to demonstrate the opportunities that exist there and things that we should be considering as it relates to service delivery. My last bullet point in the series is salary and benefits analysis. One of the things we do need to understand when we're bringing together two groups of folks, two departments, is what their salary structure is, what their benefits looks like for all employees. And I bring it up because, many times when we're doing this, I've heard the school district gets paid a lot more money than for like positions on the town side. And to be quite frank, I've heard the same thing on the school side. Town gets paid more than school, vice versa. We just need to put some facts to what the salaries and benefits are for all the employees. And so when we have like employees, what we need to do is really perform that analysis and say, hey, are we paying people the same or in a similar way? Benefits would be along the same lines, because if we're not, we're going to have to figure out a way to get people in a similar way. And I've been doing this for shared services probably for the past 10, 15 years. And I have seen some, significant changes, or not changes, but differences between, employees. But in general, it hasn't been significant. Are we paying someone, a few dollars more an hour, or actually a few cents more an hour? Yeah, maybe. But when you look at the overall annualized dollar value, that we're within the ballpark, and we just need to understand what that is. Also, what the holiday schedule looks like, and really identify any significant exceptions, so that at the end of the day, if we need to make some changes, we can. So I wanted to show you, moving on to the next slide, just I'll call it my readiness assessment summary. And I don't know if it's a bad thing, but I have 13 items or 13 criteria on this list. This actually came from one of the projects we're working on right now. But I do believe that many of these criteria are an important component of whether or not you're ready to move forward with shared services. So management level buy-in, staff level buy-in, are really important. The green plus is, yep, we're in place for this. Just the yellow check mark means that it's a push. Yeah, we're okay. The check mark minus, or what the check marks in the red, means that we have some issues. The need for personal backups and cross training. Yep, we're running lean and mean, and we need an immediate set of backups, if you will, to many of our personnel. In this particular case, it was a financial operations assessment, and they were and did have the same financial management software, or I should say, in this case, the school district was transitioning to the town's financial software, so that was a really good thing. Um, you can read. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can read. Some of these similar benefits package, similar compensation, similar work schedule. Those were really of any significance. We did have a couple of minus items. If you look at item 10, immediate space available, and again, I go back to, is this an important issue anymore? And I'm not so sure. Item 12, I think, is important. Successful past collaborative initiatives. It's a checked minus here because they tried to do something like this in the past and it failed miserably. So there's a bad taste in people's mouth. But they didn't do it in a very prescriptive way. I go back to my mashing comment earlier. Well, they were just mashing, and they didn't have a very directed approach to bringing these two groups of people together. So I guess how I look at this, and we do need to maintain a cooperative spirit. We need to be proactive. And seek out opportunities to work together and work together for success. We do need to be flexible. There's always going to be some give and take, but let's look at the common goal, that mission and vision. Where do we want to be long term? Patience is a virtue, and we do need to be patient. And I do believe, and I think I started off a good part of the discussion, we need to think differently. It cannot be the same old, same old. We do need to think differently. I think COVID is certainly an impetus and a catalyst for us to think differently. Many people will say this is our problem, but we do need to change it to, how can we unite to resolve the problem? And so, just some food for thought. I think you need to start small, meaning let's not try and take the most complex departments and bring them together. Let's start with something less complex, has a lower risk. Let's build consensus among, the participants, build trust within the user community, excuse me, and really create, positivity, right? A can-do attitude makes, all the difference in the world. And I guess I'm going to leave you with this, just a quick thought from Walt Disney. The way to get started is to quit talking and start doing. And I think with shared services, there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of discussion. There hasn't been as much doing. And if we're going to do it, I certainly recommend and suggest that we do it in a very thoughtful and prudent way, that we do it in a very structured way, and come up with a game plan and that of how it's going to work, and bring people together and share with them what that game plan looks like. Again, mashing people together is just not, is not a good successful approach. Let's come up with a very prescriptive approach and figure out the best ways to move forward. So with that, I'm looking actually at the time, and I guess I'm going to skip over the case studies because of time, and wanted to see if we had any questions out there, or if people were interested in having any discussions about anything. I'm going to give people a minute to ask, and if not, we can end a few minutes early. Well, I am not seeing any questions out there. I do want to thank you very much for attending the session today. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about shared services. I think it's something that we really need to consider, that many municipalities need to implement over a period of time, because at the end of the day, we need to, figure out ways to um, do our best for our residents, do our best for our public school students, and figure out ways to enhance services without increasing costs. And I do believe that shared services provides and is a way to get to the result for many of those outstanding issues. So with that, thank you very much. And we're going to end the municipal shared services session. Thanks again. Bye-bye.